Welcome to another episode of Community Chat. My name is Kevin Tocci. The idea of this particular show is to better inform the folks, the residents that we serve here in Abington. And we have some great guests, people that we have a chance to talk to in and around the community and beyond. Today, we are fortunate once again to be able to speak with our representation up at the State House. He is here usually quarterly just to kind of talk about some of the things that are going on in the State Senate as your representative. We have State Senator John Keenan joining us. Senator.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about how are things. We are, beyond the new year. We're beyond the inauguration. A lot has changed. How are things for you?
They're picking up, which is great at the State House. Matters in the district are always busy, but at the State House, last week we had our what they call rules debate. We determined what rules will govern how we proceed over the next 2 years in both the House and Senate. And then we also passed joint rules, or at least a Senate version of joint rules and a House version of joint rules. And to the extent they're different, that will be ironed out in a conference committee, and then we'll have some joint rules to govern us as we go forward. And we're awaiting committee assignments, which should occur in the next week to 10 days. And then we'll get to work with our committee hearings and addressing all the bills that are sent to the committees.
How is this legislative session compared to your previous ones so far?
Pretty similar. We've had a change in administration. We have a new governor, Governor Healy. And so that presents a little bit of a different dynamic, particularly when it comes to matters of budget. Because when you have a governor who's been there, the budget process becomes somewhat routinized. So how would you say it? Somewhat routine. And so we'd have contact with the administration. With a new administration coming in, they don't have a lot of time to put a budget together, so they're working very quickly on it. And so we expect that budget soon. So some of the lead up to that has been a little bit different, but it happens every 4 or 8 years whenever there's a change in the governorship anyway.
It seems as though the new administration has already hit the ground running. Some of the main items of concern is, as we know, housing stock, as well as the MBTA. The MBTA has long had its share of issues. Give me your thoughts on the administration realizing that these are key to our well-being and quality of life here in the Commonwealth of Mass.
They're absolutely essential. Everywhere I go in my district or throughout the Commonwealth, I hear from people saying that they're worried that their children or family members won't be able to live in the community where they grew up because there's just not enough housing, or the housing, because there isn't enough, is very expensive. And so there's no doubt that we need to build a lot of units, and we need to build them pretty quickly. And I think there's an understanding between the executive branch and the legislative branch that that's a priority in the upcoming session. And then tied into that is the ability to get from your home to a doctor's appointment, to school, to work. And the MBTA plays a big role in that for a lot of people. I take the MBTA very often into the State House, and it's been a little frustrating lately. It takes a little longer. What they call the headways are a little longer. But I think there's also recognition that that has to change. If we want to get people off the highways, which are really crowded, yet still give them access to places they have to go, public transportation is critical. And regional transit authorities is the same thing. We have to make sure that we invest in those so that people can get where they have to go.
Let's talk about, you talk regionally, let's also talk a little bit about your district. It's changed a little bit.
It has, yes. So I had all of, last session and for several sessions before, I had all of Quincy, all of Abington, all of Holbrook, all of Rockland, and most of Braintree. And with the redistricting, I have now only 3 precincts left in Braintree, and made up for what I lost in Braintree by picking up the community of Hanover, which has been great. I've gotten to meet a lot of people down there, know a lot of people down there. We were just over there for office hours at the Senior Center and had a really great time chatting and meeting with people. So it's a good fit, and we're thrilled to be able to represent them. We've met with the town officials and opened up that dialogue, so looking forward to it.
How important is the feedback that you get from the municipal folks, town officials in the city of Quincy. How important is that to you?
It's very important. In Quincy and in all the towns, we're in pretty regular contact, which is great. Not pretty regular. We're in regular contact with the leaders of the various towns, and then also with obviously the people of the towns. It's really important to know what's going on, because so much of what happens at the local level is dependent upon the state level, particularly when it comes to funding for schools, for police, for fire, for libraries, for veteran services, for senior services. So much of that funding is provided through local aid, and then also through grant programs. And so we try to fund grant programs, make the towns aware of those opportunities, and then work with the town as they submit applications to be awarded those grants. And so we're constantly working with the towns on those types of things. Very important, that communication.
You had mentioned in regards to the new administration with Governor Healy and Lieutenant Governor Driscoll. The previous administration, I felt as though that Karen Polito was kind of the liaison for the different needs for each community. And it seems as though that Kim Driscoll has kind of taken up that mantle. How important is that you have somebody who is in the administration that realizes the importance and is willing to have conversations directly with, whether it's a select board or a mayor or a town council?
Very important. And Kim Driscoll, Lieutenant Governor Driscoll, is a perfect fit for that, because she was mayor of Salem for so many years. So she has a real good sense of what goes on at the local level. And we're going to need that experience when it comes to housing, when it comes to transportation, when it comes to many of the home rule petitions that work their way through the legislature and to the governor's desk. Having somebody with that knowledge and experience is really helpful. And I think she has worked very quickly to establish relationships with the cities and towns, much like Karen Polito did. Karen Polito was all over the state, all over the Commonwealth, and Kim Driscoll has shown a willingness to do the same. And I think that really is helpful to cities and towns.
So, start of a new session usually means that you begin deciding what you're going to put forth, whether you're going to sponsor legislation, co-sponsor, you're going to write something new, maybe refile. What has this session been like for you when it comes to putting forth bills?
Very busy. We go through a process where we review past bills, where they went during past session, during the last session, whether they need to be reworked in any way, whether there are opportunities for new legislation. And so we do that during a lengthy process that begins late fall and goes through December and into January, when bills have to be filed. And so we focus on a few things. One that we were pretty active in, well, quite active in at the end of last session, was the revenge porn bill. In Massachusetts, it's not a crime if somebody has consented to be filmed to then share that film or that picture without their permission online. And so we've had some really tragic cases where people have consented to filming, and then the next thing they know, they're on the internet, and they didn't consent to that. We're one of the very few states, 2 or 3 states, that do not have that as a law. So I worked with Representative Jeff Roy during the session to get that passed. It passed the House, a version did, a version passed the Senate, but it was late in terms of both of them, and there was little chance to reconcile them. So we're going to really push that early in this session. We have also filed legislation again to expand insurance coverage for behavioral health and substance use particularly, but mental health also, to make sure there's insurance coverage for up to 30 days of treatment. We were successful a couple sessions ago in getting that up to 14 days, meaning insurance companies have to provide coverage. We also have been successful in making sure that people who have certain conditions or illnesses have access to insurance coverage for them. Last session, we were successful in making sure that people with MS can stay on their medications. Incredibly, they could go through the whole process of finding the right medication, and then within change of insurance, lose access to that and regress in their condition. So that was passed last session. This session, we're working to make sure that people with autism or developmental disabilities have access to whatever treatments apply or work best for them. For instance, applied behavior analysis is one of them that we're looking to make sure is covered by insurance companies. So we have a wide range of bills that we file, and we're going to push them all.
Anything as far as any of your other colleagues, or maybe there might be a general consensus about some legislation that's been needed that maybe is being discussed in the Senate currently?
There's a lot of discussion about housing. That is following up on last session where many bills were introduced, some of them for the first time, and so last session was the chance to review those bills, learn about them. I think we'll start to see movement on some of those, and I think we'll start to see a more pointed discussion on others, and whether they move or not remains to be seen. Rent control, for instance, is one. I think there'll be a lot more discussion about that. I don't know if it will move, but certainly at the point where the mayor of Boston has made it a priority, so the legislature will focus on that. And again, I don't know where the votes are on that, but it's going to be a topic that comes up. Budget is another one, obviously, that will take up a lot of our attention over the course of the next couple of months, and we'll have to come to consensus with the House of Representatives on that. Transportation, everybody recognizes, we talked about the MBTA being critical as our roads and bridges. And then there's always the issue of healthcare, cost of healthcare, and are there better ways to deliver quality healthcare more cheaply? And so we'll continue to do that. And then I'm hopeful that this will be a session also that we do a comprehensive substance use bill, and we've teed up a lot of different things for that. I thought we were going to do it last session and get close, but I'm hopeful that more hopeful that we'll do it this session.
When you say comprehensive, are we talking about adding in things that maybe not covered in the current legislation, like fentanyl? I know fentanyl is big these days, and it's one of those things that our local law enforcement is combating on a daily basis.
It'll cover the wide range. Fentanyl has just taken over. There's no more heroin on the streets. It's all fentanyl.
Yeah.
So we have to make sure that we have the appropriate treatment programs in place. We're seeing a little bit of increase in methamphetamine use, and that calls for a different type of treatment, and I don't think we're equipped for that. I had sponsored legislation and got passed legislation to set up a methamphetamine commission, stimulant commission, and that commission has reported back. And so we've got to do a lot of different things. We're going to be pushing legislation for recovery coaches, which has proven to be very helpful. Coverage for up to 30 days of treatment, making sure that those would be mental health and substance use co-occurring get the appropriate treatment in the appropriate facilities and programs. Making sure that we have prevention programs in place, and then harm reduction. We have to recognize there's some people that will continue using drugs until they're ready to stop. Mm-hmm. And while they continue using, make sure that it's safe for them to use, meaning that incidents of infection and overdoses are reduced, which helps us save cost in our healthcare system, and making sure that they have access to to programs as they move towards recovery. So broad range of things.
Any early indication as to what we might see in Governor Healey's first budget? Have any of your colleagues heard anything, or have you been able to offer anything, especially if it's going to help and benefit your district?
It's been quiet, honestly, in terms of, and because it's she's just new to office, so there is a bit of a scramble to get a budget together, and so we will receive her budget shortly, and usually the legislature uses the governor's budget as kind of giving us a sense of what the governor's priorities are. Yep. And then the House, they're in the process now. They will finalize their budget in April. We'll finalize ours in May. There'll be different priorities between the governor's budget, the House budget, and the Senate budget. And then ultimately the House and Senate will come together and present a consensus budget to the governor, and she'll refer back to hers as to see what her priorities were and are they included in the consensus budget. We just finished the process of determining how much money we'll have available for the next budget session. And so we're expecting about a 1.6% increase in revenues. Our revenues have been tracking quite well, although last month was the first month we saw where revenues did not meet expectations. And so it's time to be cautious. We've had a pretty good run with revenues. We were able to give back about $3 billion to taxpayers late last fall into the winter, and we've been able to shore up our stabilization account. But there are some warning signs on the horizon. I don't think anybody knows exactly what's going to happen, but I think we'll be ready for that.
Are you talking the R word? I don't want to say it because if I say it, we could end up trending that way, but I'm going to have to, and that is recession.
Right.
Are we seeing any signs of recession, or are any of our neighboring states in New England starting to see it, and is this something that could affect us eventually?
It's when the experts presented to the Ways and Means Committee and had to address that question, we got a mixed response. It's a very unique situation. We have very low unemployment rates, historically low. I don't think unemployment has been this low since 1959. So there are so many jobs out there. Demand for workers is great. So we're seeing a bit of an increase in wages being offered to draw talent. That increase in wages, along with a lot of other things, is somewhat fueling inflation. And then to tamp down inflation, we've got the Fed's moving interest rates. And so I think there's just a lot of uncertainty. It's a very unique situation, and we're really not sure. But we weren't sure going into the pandemic. We were preparing for cuts of at least 10% or perhaps more to all our cities and towns in our state budget. And we ended up having basically record revenues. So it's really hard to predict. The economy is also trying to sort itself out in terms of online purchasing versus brick and mortar shops, remote work participation versus in person, and what that does to the economy. There's so much going on. It's fascinating, but it's also a bit of a struggle to figure out where we're going to end up.
How does sports betting? We know that as of late, we're allowed to do sports betting here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. How does that play into the governor's budget? Is it too early to realize and predict what those revenues are going to be? Is that something we might have to wait until the 2025 budget?
I think we'll have to probably wait 2 budget cycles before we get a clear sense of exactly what those revenues will look like. It's here to stay, clearly. I don't know if you watch any of the sporting events, but it's everywhere. It's online. It's on your phone. I'm concerned that we do not have the proper safeguards in place to protect our young people from the onslaught of advertising. It's coming. Well, it's not coming. It's here. Yeah. And they're targeting young people, even though they're not supposed to be. I believe they are. That's my opinion. And young people can't escape it. And it's becoming normalized for young people. And whether it's tobacco, vaping, alcohol, cannabis, they target young people because they're looking for customers for life. Sure. And young people are very susceptible until their early to mid-20s to dependency or even addiction to some of these things. And I'm concerned that that's going to happen with sports betting.
We had earlier on in the conversation talked a little bit about the new administration's concerns with housing. Along with housing, we worry, and we always keep our mind on economic development. But I think one of the key components to economic development and housing is good water.
Yes.
Water resources. And I've seen you at your share of press conferences where you've helped your communities in your district when they're dealing with water issues, PFAS. How key is water going to be when it comes to housing and economic development, not only in your district, but the South Shore?
Essential. Some communities don't want housing, period. Other communities have raised concerns about water and sewer and infrastructure. And those are very legitimate concerns. In many of the communities that I represent, Abington and Rockland and Holbrook, and Braintree's working with Holbrook on their water supply issue. But water supply is in Hanover too, a very legitimate infrastructure concern for economic development, as is sewer. I went through the Rockland sewer plant not that long ago, spent an afternoon there, and got a sense of how that operates and what its capacity is. And they just had an emergency situation not that long ago. So water and sewer concerns have to be addressed in order for there to be any real advancement in the development of housing.
Anything that we haven't touched upon, but you want to take a moment to talk about with the viewers here in Abington?
No, a couple things. One, we continue to do our constituent services work. That's one of the most important things we do in the office. So if anybody has any issues that they want to raise with us, they can call us at the office, which is 617-722-1494. Last time I was here, I stumbled on the number a little bit. Or they can send an email to john.keenan@MA-Senate. Any issue that we can help with, we're happy to do that. And the other one, it kind of ties into this, I want to say thank you for having us. And there is legislation at the State House that will help community access. Community access has been funded in a certain way for so long, and we find that people's viewing habits are changing because of phones and tablets and computers and streaming services. But I think it's absolutely critical that we have a funding source for our local access and government access channels. And so there is a legislation that's pending that I've signed on to that will designate 20% of a fee on some streaming services that will help community and government access channels. This is where real information occurs. It's not filtered, it's not biased, it's what's going on in the community. People can tune in and watch it directly, and I think that's very important for our local democracies, for our Commonwealth, and for our country.
Yeah, I think we are, when it comes to hyper-local, I think we're where it's at. And it's interesting you bring up that legislation, because I believe this is the third time that it's being forth and being filed, and there's some great legislators like yourself and legislators in the Senate and the House who are willing, but I think there's still some details that need to be worked out. You know, and the thing that the current concern that myself and a lot of my colleagues in PEG Access cable are concerned with is the constant increase in Comcast and Verizon and whatever your provider is, and people are like, do I want to be paying $300 for basic service? And a lot of them are going to the a la carte application, going to the apps and going to the Netflix, and any help that we can get to keep providing what we provide here and having great conversations with yourself and other legislators and community leaders, or even providing an opportunity to come in and create their own shows.
Right.
That's what we like doing. So thank you very much for bringing that up.
No, happy to do it. I think it's really important, and I think going forward, the paradigm is going to have to shift. I think so much of this programming and production can occur at the local level, and then perhaps ultimately it ends up being streamed, a part of that process. But I think having it produced here by community members and representing what's going on in the community is what we have to continue to do.
And then finally, a thank you to your staff, Peter, Doug, anybody that I've had a chance to reach out to have an opportunity to talk with you on multiple mediums is definitely appreciated. And sometimes I don't even reach out. Sometimes I'll have Peter send me an email, go, hey, we're making the rounds to the local TV stations or radio stations, and we'd love to schedule something. And it's a working partnership, and it's fantastic.
I have a great team, and I'm out and about, but the real work happens with the team. They're the ones responding to constituent concerns, setting up things like this. I'm very fortunate that over the years I've had just an incredible group of people. And so I think the people in the district should feel comfortable that they have a group at the State House working on their behalf that are really dedicated, bright, talented, and do some really great work.
Fantastic. I'd love to, maybe one of these days, maybe we should have something with some of the A's. Actually, one of your colleagues in the House, Dave DeCoste, joked with me one day and said, what we should do is find a way to get some of the South Shore legislators, some of their folks in their office who do the yeoman's work, and have them have a discussion about what it is that they do when they help pull it all together and as a team.
That'd be great. That's a great idea.
I'll have to talk to Peter one of these times when I catch up with him.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
You got it.
Thank you.
And we want to thank you at home for tuning into programs like this Community Chat. If you have ideas for guests or conversations that you want to hear on this program, info@abingtoncam.tv is your way. And until our next conversation, you have yourself a great day.